Lally and I founded Stone Club together in November 2021. So for those that are new, we're responsible for you being in a dungeon on a Monday night instead of out in the sunshine in a beer garden.
Yeah, sorry.
But this is really exciting because obviously, well, I've known for a really long time that you were writing this book, and so this has been going on, for a couple of years. It's now finally published, which is really, really exciting. And we thought, having the Lost Folk and Wild Folk on the same bill seemed like a really, really good idea and really fun as well, because it's sort of looking at folk and folklore from very different perspectives, really. And I suppose it's fair to say that the Lost Folk comes very much out of the Folk Archive, which is another thing that you founded. So maybe, let's start with what that is and when you founded it, what it is.
Yeah, so back in the wilds of 2020, sort of pre-lockdown, I began the Folk Archive as an Instagram page, and at that point it was really organic. I sort of just I've been making a lot of work about kind of Morris dancing in particular, but also folk customs. I was collecting together a lot of images, and I thought I should probably just put these somewhere so that I could use them, but also things that I wasn't using, maybe other people would find inspiring. And I worked as an archivist kind of pre that, so I was sort of always quite immersed, I suppose, in kind of captioning and thinking about the context of things. And then lockdown happened, and it got quite big, and people got really, really into folk, I guess. And I didn't really know what to do. I was slightly alarmed by it because I never really set out to run an account on Instagram. But I still run it to this day, and it's still incredibly organic. Matthew will attest to this. Most mornings I'm like, oh, I need a post, and then I'll go on a sort of wild journey of research and put together a few things. But it's always kind of just really led by what I'm interested in at that moment, and sort of collecting things as I go. Generally, as we're doing events around the country with Stone Club, I'll be sort of searching for things that might feed into that folky world too.
I think we'll get into some of those strange places as we go through, but maybe because you've got so many amazing images and quite a few of them are in the place of the book, maybe we'll choose an image, you can say what it is, and then perhaps we'll start with a reading to sort of set the tone of the way in which you write in the book.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, this is a good place to start. I made this presentation, I should say, quite a while ago, so it's actually quite surprising to me what's on here. But these are two photographs of my great auntie Enid, and I discovered these in a shed, and I write about this incident in the book. So essentially, my grandfather put the family archive in the shed, and my mum and my aunt and I had a sort of wonderful and also quite sad day, discovering all these things that my great aunt had obsessively archived and done a brilliant job of kind of discovering who everyone was and keeping everything. But yeah, the shed wasn't really a very friendly environment for photos. But along that journey, I found these amazing pageant photos from a pageant that took place in 1934 in Ludlow, and it was I didn't know anything about this pageant at that point, and I went away and did a bit of research and discovered it was one of the largest pageants that took place in Britain at that point. I think 3,000 performers, and sort of 28,000 people came to see it. So it was like a real community kind of effort to make it. It was quite exciting to find these. But I also found loads of kind of maypole pictures and just generally sort of silly dressing up photos. That kind of set me on a bit of a trail thinking about, I guess, lots of the photos that exist in any family archive, which we'll call kind of lost customs or things that have maybe slightly fallen through the gaps. But I thought maybe should I do that? Read it all? Yeah. Okay. Or I could read. I don't know which one you want me to read, Matthew. Okay. We've been doing this a lot together, so we're sort of. For a long time, I have drawn inspiration from the collector and architect Charles Paget Wade's Latin motto, Nequed pereat, which translates to "let nothing perish." It resonates with a sense of love and respect for all things. By its very nature, folk is often ephemeral. It can be tricky to catch, hard to preserve, and even more difficult to resurrect. Folk customs are often blink and you'll miss them in their lifespans. Costumes get worn and used and disintegrate. Pub signs get painted over as new landlords arrive, and local tales are lost as people move away. An interest in saving folk objects is so often the preserve of a few dedicated individuals who help keep the custom going or save items from a skip. These characters have very often during their lifetimes been ridiculed or considered eccentric for their passions. They've often had to go above and beyond to save objects or buildings. Take Isabel F. Grant, who opened the first ever open-air folk museum in Britain. It was founded on the island of Iona in Scotland, where Isabel had collected agricultural tools, costumes and ephemera from the Highlands over a number of years, and she purchased a chapel to house them. Before long, the building was far too small, so she put on an exhibition in Inverness in the hope that someone would see the collection and deem it important enough to provide a larger and more permanent home. Alas, this was not the case, and Isabel moved the collection several times before finding a site in Kingussy in 1944. Isabel had to work extremely hard to keep the collection together, fighting against the odds in the turbulent times of the Second World War. Preservation of folk takes dedication and more than a little determination. In the summer of 2015, I was faced with my own task of saving an archive. I come from a family of collectors of dolls, postcards, textiles, troll dolls, and songs. My grandparents' home had shelves filled with books, drawers filled with photographs, and cupboards overflowing with magazines. My grandma even had a collection of gingerbread men in her kitchen. My great-aunt Barbara, a librarian by qualification, took it upon herself to become the family archivist. She carefully labelled and classified each photograph, birth certificate, and piece of ephemera connected to many generations of the family. When she died, the family home was sold, and all the things were left in the care of my grandfather, who duly put them in the shed at the bottom of his garden. My grandfather was not a sentimental man, and for him this archive was an encumbrance, taking up space. So into the shed the carefully labelled archive went, and there it stayed, until one summer's day when my mum, aunt and I decided to tidy it. At this point we were unaware of how thorough a job my great-aunt had done, but as we pulled out boxes it became apparent. She had researched each member of the family, saving everything she had collected. Within the boxes I discovered photographs of long-lost relatives, their lives and loves contained in curated boxes. A shed is not the friendliest environment for paper, so many of the photographs had become stuck together. The negatives had taken on strange, blurry splodges, and the letters were littered with rat droppings. However, in among it were items that had survived. Out of one box came a tinted A4 photograph of a woman in mock Tudor garb, dated 1934. Contained within the same box was a programme for a pageant that took place in Ludlow the same year. The pageant was a rendition of John Milton's masque, Camus, and the programme contained a list of characters and fold-out map of Ludlow Castle and seating plan. This lady, in Tudor dress, was my great-great-auntie Enid, dressed as the merchant's daughter. We'll move to another pageant photo just.
Oh yes, it's a great photograph.
Yes.
Well, as you say, so you started from this position where there's lots of family members that are interested in folk culture or various different aspects of what you describe as folk culture, and that in itself is a broad definition, or actually it's a very personal definition. We'll get into that actually. Maybe we'll get into what folk means. But actually, you're researching things from the past and you're finding things from the past in this instance, but also you're very much looking ahead as well, or what things are going on today and what things might be emerging, what sort of things are sort of moving into the future as well. And could you talk a bit about that, about why you looked at folk in that way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, it was really important for me to kind of lay out some of the history of folk that had come before, particularly to because I'm really interested in sort of forgotten voices, forgotten people, and there are a lot of people, it will come as a surprise, that have been written out of folk collecting. And so, I cover a lot of kind of female folk collectors who I felt had been under talked about, underrepresented within this canon of folk, but also kind of objects and customs that had maybe not been perceived as folk, but perhaps could be. But then, yeah, I really wanted to also think about now, and we are in the midst of a very, very large revival of folk, but one which is really, I think it's pretty broad and expansive in a way that perhaps other folk revivals have kind of been a bit more centered around either folk music or folk dance or kind of folk customs. They've not ever brought it all together. But it's also really expansive and really inclusive in a way that I feel previous ones haven't been. So it's very exciting, and there are a lot of people working in it who I really wanted to talk about some of them. So yeah, I cover a few kind of modern folk collectors too, in particular Angeline Morrison, who I'm a big fan of. I really wanted to sort of sing about her work really, because she's very inspiring for me. But then lots of probably more familiar names like Ross Forrest appear in there, just because I feel I had to tell that story too.
And people from back in time as well, any shout outs for different female folklorists that you just mentioned, just mention again.
Well, I mean, some of my favourites, I'm actually a very Stone Club, are the Ferguson's Gang, and I wonder, are there any people in here who know who the Ferguson's Gang are? Okay, there's a few hands, great. But yeah, they're a really inspiring group of women who were working kind of the late 20s, early 30s, and they were basically very responsible for saving large swathes of the Cornish coastline, but also a lot of early National Trust properties that got saved. And they fundraised for the National Trust, but in really amazing, surreal ways. So they do things like deliver what they just deemed their loot in things like a silver pineapple or a faux bomb. Once they tied it to a goat, and they had amazing ritual costumes that they made. And they used to go to Stonehenge every summer for a picnic, which was from Fulton Masons, I believe, so it was quite fancy.
But they were also probably responsible for saving Stonehenge.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. They that was kind of their beginnings, was in 1927 when with the campaign to kind of save the land around Stonehenge. They got really involved in that, and that's how they formed. So yeah, they're very interesting, and they were really working, I guess, against the kind of school of modernity, but in a way where it wasn't kind of against it or anti it. It was more trying to save things that they felt had existed for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, that were suddenly going to get plowed up and made into a road, a useless road.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe you can find the names actually, or remember them.
Oh yeah, they've got really good names. No, I don't think I can remember all of them. I should probably read you some of them, because they all took pseudonyms, and they're wonderfully odd.
Because there's a story that feels very contemporary for today, but obviously we're looking way back here in terms of when they're doing this. But you mentioned all their amazing costumes, but they also took sort of male pronouns and wore suits, so sort of turned themselves into the ruling class men of the day, even though they were all women. So it's a very sort of queer history of the preservation of Stonehenge as well.
No, it really is, and it's not one that gets talked about by the National Trust, which is maybe not that surprising. They do actually have a page on their website, which is quite small, but they're really fascinating. I feel like they should be much wider known. Some of their names. Okay, Bill Stickers, Red Biddy, Lord Beershop of the Gladstone Islands, Kate O'Brien the Nark, Sister Agatha, and she dressed entirely in sort of like ecclesiastical garb always, and Shot Biddy. And then there were a few kind of other people who were like loosely involved, and they had a few male members who appeared from time to time, including someone called the Artichoke, who's their kind of resident architect. Yeah.
I feel like, James, you need to find out what land they own and go and visit them. See if they're into renaturing, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. Well, actually, they were sort of quite aristocratic, or from quite aristocratic backgrounds, but I think largely got disowned by their families for their mad behaviour. Yeah,
it's such an interesting story, fascinating story that you paint about Ferguson's Gang and what they did, and that's just one example. I think though, as we're in London, and actually yesterday we visited the Garden Museum for the first time, and there's a film that plays there, and there's a particular character in the book I'm looking to read about as well, and tell everyone about as well. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I
no
do.
one else might.
No, I was very excited about this. I've sort of been meaning to go to the Garden Museum for quite a while, and finally found ourselves kind of close by. It's quite difficult when we come to London usually because we're sort of rushing around. Usually thinking, oh, I've got to get to the social in about an hour. But yesterday we had a bit of time, so we went there. And yeah, playing in the main gallery was a film which I write about in the book about a man called Brenton Pink, who is an incredible individual. And I will read you a short section about him. But he was really inspiring to me, and the film is, I really recommend going to find it. You can watch it on YouTube now. And it comes from a section of the book. Sorry, it's very hard doing this one-handed. I should have used the mic stand. It comes from a section of the book called Lost Worlds, which explores sort of folk art environments, because I was really wanted to write also about in that they don't often get considered within sort of considerations, I guess, of folk in terms of customs and like folklorists. They're quite often separate, and folk art is often considered separately, but for me they all kind of interlink. An example of an urban folk art building sits on the corner of a street in Brockley, southeast London. It is a Victorian semi-detached house. The external walls, once brightly painted in elaborate patterns, are peeling, flaking and faded. The garden, previously a sea of hollyhocks, geraniums, roses and red valerian, is now bare, and the formerly cherry red steps leading up to the front door have discoloured to pink. In 2017, the owner and curator, Brenton Samuel Pink, known as Mr. Pink, died, and it has subsequently become a glimmer of its former self. If you had visited just a few years prior to this, you would have found a world of colour and vibrancy that would have made even the most distracted passerby stop and look. Brenton created a life-filled fortress, a world in which he was able to express himself fully within the confines of the monotone city. Brenton was born in Jamaica in 1925 and came to England as part of the Windrush generation in 1957. He worked for Lewisham Council as a street cleaner, and in his spare time set about turning his home into a small piece of Jamaica in England. My additions make a difference, brighten it up. I've created a part of Jamaica here. Some like this house and some may not like it. I don't know, but I know a lot of people like it, and I like it myself. Using cans of household paint and ready-mixed plaster, Brenton painted the exterior and interior of his home in vibrant reds, pinks, mustard yellows and blues. He painted stripes on the walls and further enhanced these with 3D lattice patterns using plaster and white paint. Here was something simultaneously both intensely Jamaican and intensely English. Bouquets of dried flowers were hung from the ceiling alongside bursts of dazzling pink and silver Christmas tinsel. His mantelpiece was filled with candles, ornaments and photographs of family in Jamaica. In this space, memories from two homes were combined, Jamaica and England. In 1996, the filmmaker Helena Apio made an extraordinary 15-minute film about Brenton entitled A Portrait of Mr. Pink. It is extraordinary in the sense that it is one of the last remaining pieces of evidence we have showing Brenton's life and home in its original state. In the film, Helena records Brenton sitting in an English garden wearing a wide-brimmed hat he had adorned with flowers and foliage. Behind him are blue and red striped columns. Brenton's hat looks reminiscent of a Morris dancer's May morning kit. This could be Jamaica, or it could be England. There are roses and delphiniums of an English garden, and there is the adornment and use of colour of the houses he remembers in Jamaica. I love plants, and since I also cultivate in Jamaica, when I come here, I couldn't get to plant what I used to there, coffee and chocolate. So these flowers remind me of the plantation we do in Jamaica. It is without a doubt a tragedy that Brenton Pink's once vivid home has been left to crumble. And it is very sad, because it now, there's quite a campaign around it to sort of save it, and actually I was really happy to see in the Garden Museum that in the captioning they had mentioned this, and they were sort of talking about the fact that they are trying to sort of save it, but it is there. You can go and see it, but it doesn't look anything like it did.
I think this is one of my favourite parts of the book, actually. Because you deal with all kinds of different people from the past and things that are going on now. But here was someone that was making something truly incredible, and it is as magical as something like Derek Jarman's garden in Dungeness. It's got the same sort of willful, artistic flair of I'm going to create something here, and I'm just going to do it because I love it and I want to do it. And I think the way you uncover these stories is so special. And how do you come across those different things? What goes into it? Is there chance? I mean, you said before about traveling around, but I'm always amazed because we go to places, or you go to places and come back and go, I've just found this thing.
It's very. I mean, it is really organic. It's kind of. I think I'm always a really big advocate for just looking and spending time in a place and making sure that you look up and you look down the alleyways and you take the strange circuitous routes to the place rather than just getting on a bus or train. I'm a big walker, and I think that's partly it. Sort of you just naturally discover things if you are willing to take the time and focus. It's a pretty slow pursuit. Like none of these things that I write about are things that happened overnight. They were because people decided to take the time. And so I think collection is a bit like that too. It's like, you have to decide that you're going to collect something. And sometimes it can be deeply frustrating because you can't find anything you're looking for, or, you have to take a kind of odd route to get there. But it's generally pretty joyful. And I don't know, I think I just quite enjoy going down rabbit warrens. And often, I'll start in one place and then I'll end up somewhere completely different. And the first thing will get knocked out, and I'll remember it years later and think, why didn't I use that? But it's usually because I found something else.
Well, I suppose in terms of that, in terms of starting in one place and ending up somewhere else, we mentioned sort of Derek and Mr. Pink's house and those sort of things. One of the things I was thinking about a lot reading the book was about how 4,000 years ago people had an idea about creating structure, creating a ritual place, a really special place that took enormous amounts of energy and effort to do at a time when you couldn't go to the supermarket, so this is basically like really hard work. And so they created things like Stonehenge, all these dolmens, stone circles, etc. And then if you fast forward, I guess, to, I don't know, like late 20s or the 1930s, there was another human impulse to do some of those sort of things, but instead of thinking about making enormous trilithons or dolmens, standing stones, they decided to make model villages.
Yes, indeed. I like that you liken them to Stonehenge. I mean, I love a model village. So before I wrote the book, I actually hadn't been to one, but I had quite a long health wish that I would go to one. So for Matthew, I dragged him around. I think 3 in the end we went to. Maybe more actually, yeah, probably more. But yeah, no, I really wanted to write about them as kind of folk environments because I find them fascinating. The fact that someone would spend hours and hours of their life creating something which essentially is just so silly, but also that they have this really amazing power to kind of blend the mythic and the mundane in a way which felt very kind of folkloric to me. There are some brilliant examples of like brutalist car parks in miniature next to like Stonehenge, or like a really amazing cathedral. And I love that merger, or the fact that you get like the village shop next to the palace. It sort of blurs all the lines of society, and that feels quite fun. And also you get to stomp around like human Godzilla, which was a joy.
I mean, Legoland Windsor even has Stonehenge and Glastonbury all in the same field.
Yeah, exactly. There are no rules.
I mean, there's various things with model villages, isn't there? There are model villages that are exact replicas at scale of a place, and then there's completely invented environments, and then there's some that are sort of a bit of a mixture. Maybe you've got someone here.
I've got no. I'm going too fast. Just talking about the model village for a minute. Yeah, I'm techie.
But then there's another part of the model village that I think we both got really excited about.
Yes, the model of the model of the model of the model of the model. How long can I go? It was really exciting discovery, the model of the model. I didn't know about them until I went to a model village, but they pretty much all have fun, and they're quite silly. They're sort of, usually, they're actually usually fiberglass now, aren't they? But sometimes they're kind of made of wood or something.
So sort of on a table.
Yeah, usually on a table, and you can stare down into them, and basically it'll be the whole model village, and then there'll be the model of the model, and it will just be like this portal, you can't even see the end. They're brilliant, I think.
It's like a "you are here."
Yeah, exactly.
And it
Yeah,
keeps going down.
Yeah, just keep staring forever. Hope you get sucked in. But yeah, no, they're kind of an interesting feature, a bit of a kind of maker's mark, I guess, of the model village world.
I think it's both kind of like flexing the skills because they're all like a exact.
Well, yeah, some of them are not. Some of them are a bit wobbly. I like those ones better.
There's one, I think it was Wimborne, and there's like a wedding, as you walk around and people like run across it to find, when the sound goes off, so there's like a wedding, and you have to literally lie on the floor to see that there's a wedding in the church. And then this phone box started ringing across, and Lally sort of like clambered and knocked children out of the way and stuff to get to it, just to see it, and then lay on the floor, and the phone, you can answer the phone in the phone box, can't you? It speaks to you.
Yeah, it's very, so I think that when I went to answer the phone, there was a man behind me. And he was doing some quiz that they give you, and he was very upset that I got there first because I got the point. But no, it's great. There's all sorts of sounds and sort of sensory aspects of the village, and you kind of you have to get quite involved. Like you have to sort of call if you want to see. Wimborne's a brilliant example because not only obviously you've got the buildings, but then all of the shop fronts are amazing and really record really odd sort of. Things like poultiers and like strange forgotten crafts. So that was another kind of aspect I thought was quite interesting because they also have a lot of lost buildings which have either been destroyed or kind of don't exist in the actual town anymore, but are still in the model village.
Yeah, in some ways, some of them are a more accurate sort of social, historical document of the town than any records because they're sort of made at a certain time and then preserved there almost without change often.
Yeah, and sometimes with the buildings, I suppose, that wouldn't have been considered to be needed. I mean, Wimborne has like the public toilets from the 60s, which are really ugly. And why did they include them? But it's kind of, I don't know, I do quite like that it's like this exact replica of a particular period.
And I suppose it might be good as well to think about some of the folk objects that you consider to be folk objects, and actually maybe also a good time to talk about some of the other things that you explore, and also
it's not all model villages.
No,
don't worry.
There's a model village Instagram account you're on, but then there's also a church Needle one.
Yeah, so a lot. I mean, I'm always trying to point people at kind of things that maybe haven't been perceived as folk but could be, and church Needle's an interesting one. I think. It was a few years ago now, I received a text from someone and have you ever thought about going around taking photos of church kneelers? And I thought, well actually I do have quite a few photos of church kneelers already. So at that point I kind of thought, well, I'll start sort of loose, can you use the word, archive of them. And so I now go around taking pictures everywhere we go. But I think they're really interesting because obviously there's the craft involved in them. They take hours and hours of work, but also they often record kind of customs quite often that are lost in a place, or kind of societies or clubs or strange pockets of like local folklore. And they're really beautiful too, and they often are community pursuits. So people have come together to make their needles. They're very proud of them usually too. And we've had a few fun things happen recently. We went to Zena Church, which is right down in the south of Cornwall. It's a very small village, and it has a pub, maybe about 4 houses. There used to be a museum, but that has long since closed, and there's a church. And in the church, I mean, mostly people go there to see the Mermaid of Zena, which is an amazing old bench end, which is in the church, and she's very lovely. I do recommend her. But I go to see the Needlers, because the Needlers are amazing there. And we went, and it was probably a couple of months ago now, and sort of going around photographing them. Matthew was chatting to someone who was arranging the flowers. And then out of the gloom appeared her husband, I presume. And I was looking at this point at a particular Nila, which is near the Old Zone. It's a really amazing kind of patchwork of, I guess, images from around Zena. And took the photo and he said, "Oh, do you know the story about this Neela?" And I said, "No, I don't. You have to tell me." And he said, "Well, a few years ago now, Alexander McQueen was visiting Zena," which that was the first oh, okay. And he was inspired to make a collection from this Neela, and so he'd sort of gone away and done this, and then he decided he was going to donate £1,000 to the church and a handbag to the lady who made the Neela, which is very sweet, I thought. But I actually at that point was thinking, God, that he probably could have afforded a bit more. And so I went home and I looked up the collection. I was really disappointed. Like the Neela is way better. But it was very sweet, and I still and I've been pondering ever since this image of Alexander McQueen sort of wandering the streets of Zena. There's like one street, so not big.
I love that's where he got his inspiration from there, this church.
Yeah,
and like you go in some churches and they've got all the Neelas sort of hidden over against a very damp wall, and in other places they display them.
Yeah, but that's partly why I kind of got interested in them, because more often than not I was going to places and they were sort of a bit moth-eaten, and I guess they were being used, as you say, to like mop up damp, or kind of just hidden behind cupboards and not being cared for, and that seemed like a real shame, that there'd been this kind of period where an enormous amount of effort had gone into creating these projects, and then suddenly they were just disappearing.
And quite often we go to those churches and I'm looking for ancient stone crosses, megaliths that could be turned into crosses, or just very, very old pieces of stone. And then we'll go in the church and they'll be presented, I'll get really excited, they've got amazing Neelas, and you'll just go, they're kid made.
Yeah, I know, sorry. No, it's true. They so there's a company at Hebden Bridge who sell kits, so you can send off and make your own Neela. And obviously those also take a lot of time. I'm not throwing shade on those Neela makers, but I really like the ones that kind of have been designed or invented by the community, because they're the odder ones, and they're the ones that really record the kind of strange customs or odd bits of
Like our
place.
favourite one is St. Buria.
Yes, that one was amazing. Yeah, so in St. Buryan Church, which is kind of right down south in Cornwall, there's a Neela, which is it's of the Merry Maidens, but in the centre is a crucifix with beams of light radiating from it, and it's just a really fantastic merger of kind of Christian and pagan beliefs coming and appearing on a Neela.
It's actually amazing, that one, because on the corners, because they're sort of oblong, aren't they? On the corners it's got the two pipers, the standing stones near the Merry Maidens, and the Merry Maidens stone circle, as you say. I don't know, and then I think it is a harmonious thing, because someone obviously thought, well, it's a local landmark that people come and visit, but also the church is here now, obviously. So I don't know what was going through their mind, but it's exquisitely made.
Hard to say what was going through. I mean, I think maybe they, someone really liked standing stones, but then felt slightly guilty that they were bringing that into the church, so had to quickly remedy it with a crucifix.
I wonder if they took it in, and I don't know how it works for me, maybe they took it in and showed it to the vicar,
Oh,
and then he
no,
was
no,
like,
no. I think so.
and they were like, can I just suggest a slight amendment?
Get some rays of light.
Yeah. It's a big cross as well, though,
It's huge, yeah.
I think there's one more thing I'd like to ask you about before we do an end reading, and that's modern rituals, really modern rituals. And there's a few of them that you talk about in the book. There's lots of numerous sites and there's lots of exciting things to talk about as well, but one of the ones I was really pleased to see you explore was the Day of the Dead, or the Day of Death.
Yeah, actually only gets a really brief mention. I would have loved to write about it more. But yeah, we went a few years ago to the Toxteth Day of the Dead. I don't know if anyone here has been to it, but it's a really incredible ceremony. I'm going to use the word ceremony that happens in Toxteth in Liverpool. And it was started by Jimmy Corthy, who is one half of the band, the KLF, as a kind of response to his brother dying. And his brother, I didn't know him, but I get the sense that he was maybe looking for a sort of alternative method to how you would make a funeral. He didn't want to do it the way that we are encouraged to. So Jimmy came up with a quite surreal, pretty strange pretty interesting way of kind of celebrating his brother's life, and he decided he was going to build a pyramid of bricks made from people's ashes. So 23 grams go into each brick. I think they have 38 bricks. They need something like 38,000.
I think they've got 90 now, but they need
Oh, they have to have
38,000.
Gosh,
Yeah.
it's really gone up. That's great. So each year they have a day where they inter the bricks, and they build the next layer of the pyramid with the people that have died that year. And around the actual bricklaying, they've built a kind of, it's like an amazing collection of people that come, both people who are related to the people who are in the bricks, but also kind of a wider community who build the custom. And essentially, you know, they come together, they make the costumes, they make the music, they decide what's going to happen at the funeral. And it's really beautiful because it's a sort of, I mean, we often think about like death as being, you know, it's at the end, and we're not gonna make new friends in that process, and it's, you know, it's all meant to be very somber, and thank the Victorians for that. But actually, what I found that it was incredibly joyous. People were making new connections through death, which was felt like a really amazing thing. Lots of friendships come out of it, and it was both sad, but like actually there was kind of real hope in it, which I really enjoyed. We gave a talk as part of it, which looked at kind of Neolithic death practices, and there are lots of kind of things that happen in the day which are kind of encouraging people, I guess, to think about it in new ways, and, you know, maybe search beyond it just being like, well, let's put someone, you know, cremate someone or put someone in the ground, basically. So it was, I found, really inspiring, actually. And I pondered about whether it was a folk custom. I came to the conclusion that it was, because it's like, I talk a lot about the definitions of folk, and one of them for me is it for and of the people, and this absolutely is. It's, you know, and it's also from a very particular place, like it really belongs to that particular part of Liverpool.
And there's all sorts of ways you can get involved, isn't there? We ran a Stone Club School of Death, which, like I say, was sort of ancient burial practices, but you can learn how to make bricks, you can learn how to become a brick bearer. So they sort of put them on a platform, and you pull them on ropes, a bit like an Egyptian painting, because it's going to be the same size as the Great Pyramid of Giza, right? It's going to be,
It's going to be pretty huge.
and it's going to be in Toxteth. No, it's not going to be in Toxteth. No, it's going to be Birkenhead. Because part of the ritual is you go across the River Mersey, which is like crossing the River Styx. And when you get to the other, and they read out the names and stories of the dead as you go
In
across.
total silence, like it was that aspect of it was really, I found incredibly moving, because I mean, you're not allowed to talk at all, and then everyone on the boat, there's a certain point in it where you have to shout the names of everyone you know who's died.
Yeah.
And it's so emotional, and like even thinking about it now, I feel like, oh, but it was really incredible. And I think, you know, that idea of like immersion being a very important part of folk practice, for me, it's a really important part of it, and it's something that can be difficult to think about in the age of kind of social media, because we're kind of, you know, a lot of people go to a custom, they don't necessarily get involved with it, which is fine, but I think there is this aspect of being a participant in it, which gives you a whole other sense of what it means.
And there's processions, there's lots of things you talk about in the book, you know, when you're looking historically, it sort of incorporates more you process. There's a nice green van that's sanding out the bricks to the people that are going to say goodbye finally. Well, maybe not finally, because they come back every year as a community, like you say. And you walk for about a mile. Lots of people are beeping their horns because no one gets any permission to close the road.
No,
so you
no
just walk
permission.
very slowly with this pyramid of bricks slowly growing. And then when you get to the end, you get to a venue, and there's a cement mixer on stage, and there's two Technics 1210s and a DJ, and then there's an undertaker, not a funeral director, an important distinction. And they'll read, you know, the family are invited up on stage, they read a little bit about the person that's died, while having a rave out of an ice cream van, and then the brick gets laid, doesn't it? That's what happens. And then you sort of party for a few hours, and that's the end of it. And then you come back the year after. So why don't we choose one more picture, and then how about we end with?
You say if there's anything that.
I mean, I love that Neela one then.
Which one? This one, the
Yeah.
cooking.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a trio of Neelas. Got Clipping Sunday, which is a custom that happens in Kingswick in Gloucestershire. They've got amazing kneelers.
Also in the book.
Also in the book, yeah.
The ceremony.
The ceremony is in there. It's a really amazing thing. We went a couple of years ago. Basically, all the children, well, it used to be all the children, it's now adults too, because the village is quite small and they don't have that many children, but they join hands around the church and they sing this really pagan hymn, don't they? It's kind of, yeah, it's quite a fascinating merger of things.
It's a bit like the Maypole scene in The Wicker Man.
It's slightly unloving, and then they give everyone a clipping bun at the end, which
They
is
throw them, don't they, from the top
one
of
of
the
the hands
stairs?
to them actually, like, very politely.
Well, I was getting carried away.
But there are bun throws, there are positive bun throws.
And a special pie.
There is a special pie, a puppy dog pie, which sounds way worse than it is. It's actually quite tasty. But yeah, it's an interesting day out, and actually the graveyard also at the church there is incredible because it has 99 yew trees which are clipped in the most incredible kind of bulbous shapes, and they have a separate custom around the clipping of that, so there's often quite a confusion between the two things because it's the clipping of the church and the clipping of the yews. And there's a great folk story about the fact that if a 100th yew ever appears, the devil will come.
Actually, just as an aside, you need to mention both Pan. Pan also
gosh,
features,
yeah.
and then the visitor centre with the lady with the sort of bee that was sort of driving
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, so when we went there, it was a bit of a stumble, wasn't it? It appeared on our route, and we were taken in by the yews, but then discovered quite quickly that there was this whole legend of Pan around Kingswick, and it's a bizarre tale. I can't really go fully into it now because it will take years of our lives. But there used to essentially be a statue of Pan that was possessed as part of the clipping ceremony, and then it was buried in the churchyard supposedly because the new vicar didn't approve. He did not like the fact that Pan appeared. So there are all these like really wonderful forums you can go on online where they discuss the location of Pan.
Yeah, where's Pan?
Where is he? And then someone emailed me at one point, 'cause, I guess it got out that I was interested in this, and they said there's actually a ghost mark on the side of the church where he was once attached to the church. I still don't know if this is true. And you can sort of make it out. They sent me a photo. I think I can kind of see it, but yeah, it's a strange place, isn't it? And then the lady in the visitor centre. Sorry, I was getting to her. So yeah, we went into the tiny visitor centre in the graveyard to ask the woman if she knew anything about where Pan might be buried. She was not happy. She did not like this
She
question.
was like, who told you?
Yeah, she really was. It was quite terrifying. It was actually like we'd entered the Wicker Man because she kind of like eyes were everywhere and I don't know what.
And you were freaking out, and I was like, no, I'm not going to give up. And there was this sort of drone bee that was like slowly
It was just
delaying,
going
that was
on and
circling
on.
her.
But then you won her over and she
Yeah.
sang us
She
the
sang us
clipping
the
hymn.
song.
But she sang us the original version that they no longer sing, which is very, very pagan. It was, yeah, quite the day out, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, she burst into song with no warning, and then finished and went, never tell anyone.
Genuinely terrifying. Yeah, I don't know what there is more to say about that,
Well,
really.
why don't we finish with the reading?
Yeah. Yes.
See, I have never told any of you that story.
Never heard anything. Yeah, so I'm going to finish with a reading. It's very short, which is, I guess, a sort of call to arms and a request for everyone to go out there and look and get involved in your folk communities and explore the world of folk. I have frequently been asked during this current revival in folk whether I think the enthusiasm of people for folk will wane. Will people not grow tired and move on to the next thing? My answer is always that people only grow tired of folk when they grow tired of being alive. Customs, traditions, and all the bits in between are parts of being human. The ways in which they manifest can be different. Sometimes it's through a shell garden, other times it's in a parade through the streets, and often it's in the annual fair day that takes over a town. At the centre of it all, though, is the desire to make a mark and be heard. A chance to sing, to dance, and to make merry, to celebrate a wassail, or to make a mosaic, or learn a clog dance, or see in the May, is to be alive. It is a point of connection to our ancestors, but it is also a chance to connect to the future and to be hopeful about that future. Celebrating the coming of spring or the ebbing of winter is a way in which we can say, it's okay, another season will come, and another, and another. And what is more hopeful than that? Folk allows us to put the colour into the grey days and makes us feel that brighter moments are coming. As long as we inhabit the earth, humanity will find some sort of way of marking our days, our seasons and our holidays, because it is the way in which we mark time, the way in which we collect together, and the way in which we express ourselves. In unsettled times, this becomes more essential than ever. Hence, rather than people's interest waning, I think it will increase, because to be interested in and engaged in a folk practice is to find belonging. And this is paramount in a world where we face a changing climate, ecological unrest, and many of us experience political division and economic deprivation. In an unsettled world, to engage in folk customs is a radical act. It is a message that we have not given up, that we will continue to dream, and that we believe there is something better ahead, something worthy of celebration. To continue to don a costume, to dance, to plait a corn dolly and clap together, is to believe that the world is alive. It is a recognition that through coming together, we are a force for change. We are the folk, and we will not be lost. Because wherever there are people, there is community. And wherever there is community, there is folk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lally MacBeth. And so we're going to take a short break for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll have Jackie Morris and Tamsin Abbott and Wild Folk, and we're going to explore some stories, and please do stick around for that.